Hi there. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Crystal Wittevrongle, collaborating with Common Sense Edmonton, here today with Tim Cartmell, who is running for mayor of Edmonton in the upcoming 2025 election. Tim, thank you so much for being with me here today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning.
Thank you. All right, let's jump right into it. I would love to hear about the foundation you are bringing to this role and what you're planning if you become mayor of Edmonton.
Oh, well, we're planning a lot. So our campaign is based on three primary pillars: safer streets, tougher on taxes, and building it better. And I can dive into each one of those things in a little bit. We're also absolutely determined to solve the infill concerns that people have very quickly and straight away after the election. So maybe I'll start with that one first. Our intent is within the first 40 days to move amendments to the zoning bylaw that addresses all of the things that people don't like about what the infill policies currently are doing to establish neighborhoods. So establish proper limits on building height, on building setback, front and back, on the number of units that is permitted on on an infill lot, where that, and I would suggest 3 or 4 as a maximum. Where we see more than 2 residential units on a lot, a requirement for on-site parking, a solution for trash that comes with that infill, a conversation about how we reintroduce the ability of people in established neighborhoods to have a say in what happens in their neighborhoods,
Mhm.
a complete review of the district plans with proper engagement. Those district plans, the 15 district plans that overlay our city, were supposed to actually speak to the uniqueness and unique character of all of our neighborhoods. That work has not
Mhm.
been properly done. It needs to be redone. And then I want to examine and refine the definitions of primary and secondary corridors, and return the emphasis of infill in our city to the great big open spaces where we can do the most good. Places like Blatchford Field, downtown Edmonton, east downtown Edmonton, the Northland site, the university properties, South Campus, those kinds of things. So that is a very strong pledge that in the first 40 days we make those changes directly and provide both security to those that live in those neighborhoods and predictability to those that might want to build in those neighborhoods. When I talk about safer streets, I'm talking about effectively a combination of community policing, true community policing, where police officers are a big part of the community, involved in the community league, knowing the merchants on the street, knowing what's happening on the streets that they're assigned to, that they're more than just a visible presence. They're actually an involved and engaged presence in our city, and that they bring with them the supports that we need in those places, whether that's social work professionals that are available 24/7, like the police are, or it's a little bit of accountability in those spaces. A true return to city policing. And I would note that because we're going to talk about dollars, the conversations I've had with our new police chief indicate that at the least at the beginning, that is a deployment issue, not a dollar issue. There's enough dollars in that part of the system to do the work. It's a matter of redeployment of the officers that we have. When I talk about tougher on taxes, I'm talking about a reallocation process, whether we call it zero-based budgeting or line-by-line review of our budget,
Mhm.
that would be done by the council table. I don't think it's fair to, and quite frankly, has not been successful for the 8 years I've been on council to have our city administration asked to cut their own budgets and the budgets of their colleagues. This needs to be a council-led process. And it needs to happen, very quickly after the election, where we take the money that's already in the system and reallocate it to the services that are the priorities of the people in the city of Edmonton.
Mhm.
And we need to get hold of construction chaos. It makes no sense to talk about, revitalizing downtown or a safer downtown or a downtown with an arts district and a sports district when you close all the roads and half the bridges that access your downtown. If you live on the west side of Edmonton, you can't get anywhere up, down, or sideways. That stops immediately. We will get a hold of this construction plan and make sure that people can get around our city, make sure that we finish some things before we start the next batch of things, and make sure that those projects are properly budgeted and properly monitored so they don't go over time and over budget. I've
Mhm.
done that particular thing for 35 years. I bring, the experience of the career I had before I started on city council to bear on these things. And I really think that I've got the tools kit and the experience and the education and the knowledge that is required to take us through the next 4 years.
Mhm. Mhm.
But here we are.
Well, that's a great overview, and you hit on so many things that I want to talk with you about today.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the infill development since it was the first thing that you mentioned. And there has just been a massive upswell of folks saying that they weren't properly consulted or engaged or even heard much about this before it began, and it is drastically impacting their communities. How do you think that the public should be engaged in things like this in the future to allow them the voice that they have?
Yeah, I've talked about a couple of things, and the first would be a council committee. So we have a lot of committees at City Hall. Some are
Mhm.
administrative, some are bureaucratic, some are council committees. And so a council committee is one that reports direct to council that is effectively populated by council.
Mhm.
So I would like to see a council committee that meets, 2 to 3 times a year, populated by people from established neighborhoods, ordinary at-large citizens that come from these neighborhoods and say, this worked, this didn't, and guide us through in a very specific way. And I want to expand that conversation a little bit to talk about all the things that happen in neighborhoods. So the
Mhm.
infill thing is a big provocative thing. It's something that I tried to bring a halt to earlier this summer and was not successful in achieving a moratorium there. But there's other things that affect established neighborhoods as well.
Mhm.
Infill, neighborhood renewal, where we're spending gargantuan amounts of money to renew neighborhoods that require some renewal, but not necessarily the wholesale renewal that we're seeing.
Mhm.
I wanted to have a conversation around bike lanes. I want to have a conversation around, I talked about construction, but construction from a neighborhood perspective. And I want to talk about these things in a cumulative effect aspect. So those are, perhaps not the most consumable words. I want us to establish a baseline in every neighborhood about where the neighborhoods are now. What is their
Mhm.
population? What is their density? What is their property values? And how much activity are we going to see in a particular neighborhood over the next 2 or 3 years? And because that all of that activity has an effect. So
Mhm.
when we reach a point where we've seen a lot of activity in a particular place, that we stop activity in a particular place.
Mhm.
So and give people a break from this constant change of detour, change of road, change of what's happening on their street, change. It's a lot. So all of that ought to be informed by the people that actually live in those neighborhoods. And so
Mhm.
I'd like to uh, do a true effort to have those people literally sit at the council table and advise council in a meaningful way. And maybe not forever, but while we get this particular part of our city work back on track. I'm not a big
Mhm.
believer in bigger government or red tape, but sometimes you need to put the brakes on something when it's really affecting people. And I view this as a very key piece of the puzzle, is to understand what the effects have been on people in these neighborhoods.
Mhm. And with the infill development, how do you balance the need for more housing with the pace of development in some of these areas?
By emphasizing those great big spaces, we can build thousands of units of housing in those spaces I described. East
Mhm.
downtown, downtown specifically, the Blatchford development, the old Northland site, the big open spaces in near the university, the main
Mhm.
campus. But there are lots, and by that I mean literal legal residential lots, even commercial lots that can be the home to hundreds of units of housing if we just methodically comb through our city and look where housing development is appropriate. And again, I would
Mhm.
point to primary and secondary corridors. Um, and I want to frame this in the lens that I look at it through. Uh, we have a competitive advantage in Edmonton. You can get a home here and a little bit of land here for less money than any other place in any of the big cities in Canada. Edmonton is a place where you can get that and have all of the comforts and amenities and advantages of living in a city,
Mhm.
entertainment and education and employment and travel. And access to travel, but it's still a place that is small enough that it has a small town feel. You know the people in your neighborhood. So affordability is a competitive advantage, but it's not a crisis. If we
Mhm.
shift our focus to those great big places that we can build units in great quantities to ensure we have the supply that addresses demand and holds housing affordability in check, when we then turn to the thoughts of our established neighborhoods, it's not through a desperate crisis management ethic, which I do not believe is required. It is through a thoughtful, how should neighborhoods evolve over time
Mhm.
lens. Our mature neighborhoods are 100 years old or more.
Mhm.
Housing is going to be renewed. Buildings are going to expire. That's okay. The question is,
Mhm.
how should those neighborhoods evolve and how should those buildings be replaced? That should be our focus. And if we focus on this is a really cool place, this neighborhood, it's unique from any other place, how should it evolve? What do the people that live there think? Then we're on the right track to thinking about what should be permitted and what should not.
Mhm. And I mean, like concentrating housing near transit hubs is definitely part of the discussion as well as just transit overall. And so I'd like to talk a bit about transit and transit safety, which kind of folds into a larger conversation
Yeah.
about safety as well. What are your thoughts on transit safety in the city of Edmonton? There are folks who are very hesitant to take transit, but often require it to get from A to B. What do you plan on doing differently to ensure safety on transit?
So transit safety is a subset of safety generally in our
Mhm.
communities, right? When we talk about safety in public spaces, it extends into our transit spaces, but it also extends into places like our malls, which are publicly accessible, privately owned spaces.
Mhm.
But if we're going to focus on transit specifically, there's a couple of pieces. I spoke earlier about a community policing ethic.
Mhm.
Another way of saying that is beat cops. Now, we used to have this ethic in the city of Edmonton. If you go, pre-COVID, 2016, 17, 18, we had what we called LRT beat cops.
Mhm.
So police officers specifically assigned to patrol in a community policing way, in a visible way, in a diffuse the situation and bring the solutions kind of way.
Mhm.
And we've lost that because those officers were deployed to other places. So let's bring them back to the transit system platforms, but some of our problematic transit centers as well. That's a first step.
Mhm.
And we know specifically on transit that when we have a visible deterrent on our LRT platforms, we see success. Less calls for help, less concerns about safety, and quite frankly, more people. And that is a key to making it feel safer. The other thing we need to do is introduce fare gates on our LRT platforms. We
Mhm.
effectively have a fare gate on every bus, but we have nothing that manages access to our LRT spaces. Fare gates would provide that perception of safety and that layer of safety. The other thing it would do, though, is make people pay to use the system. And right now, we don't know how many people are actually paying to use the system, but it's not very many. Every other big city that I've been to has some form of you got to pay to use the subway. You should be paying to use our subway, and right now you're not. And so fare gates have that dual role of actually reinforcing the need to pay for the service and reinforcing the ethic that this is a place for people to use transit and not for any other thing. And then a
Mhm.
third piece to that is those that need to use transit for shelter, for a safe space, a safe haven. We need to provide safe havens in other places for those people to spend their days in.
And so what are your thoughts on what to do to help those people, if not in the transit system, but how do you work with the province, let's say, in order to provide supports for these people?
Well, I think first of all, it's a shared responsibility. I'm not gonna do interviews and get on social media and lay this all at the province's feet, like, others that I serve with currently are inclined to do. This is a shared responsibility. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have a health ministry, and we don't have a health minister. So when you're talking about the supports that people on our streets need,
Mhm.
it is effectively health supports that they need. But we can do that in a shared way. The city of Edmonton has long done affordable housing, housing that is available from an income perspective, but not necessarily from a health perspective. So
Mhm.
this needs to be a collaborative effort. And a collaborative effort starts with actually being collaborative, actually, approaching the province with respect, respect for the offices, even if you don't necessarily like the people that are there, respect for the offices, and effectively a request that people that are in these offices are likewise respected, that we are, in a mature, deliberate, dispassionate way going to get together and talk about the solution sets. I think, frankly, we know generally what they are: more space for people to congregate, to heal, to get support. The question is, how are we going to collaboratively provide those spaces in a reasonable way? It starts with a better relationship with our province and a better relationship with our police service. And quite frankly, I don't know that any of the people I'm competing with really have the credibility to say that they can establish those relationships. And quite frankly, I've already had them, and I had them going back to the previous NDP government at the provincial level as well.
Hmm. And so I'd like to talk a little bit more about that, the relationships with the province or even
Yeah.
the police service. What would you do to help fortify that moving forward? Because we do need the city and the province to work together, just like we need, EPS and the police commission and the city to work together. And these are all relationships that have been strained over time and have left residents, questioning how to move forward.
I think they've been strained. I'm going to be a bit provocative about this. I think they've been strained since before the last election by those on council that tend to the personal and away from the work. And so when I said earlier that I come to this with a very healthy respect for the office, and quite frankly, I'm not concerned about the persons or the personalities in the office. I
Hmm.
don't care what provincial party you came from. I don't care what you said on your social media yesterday. My concern is that from an office to office perspective, we have a duty, we have a responsibility, we have a mandate, and there's an expectation with the people that have elected both of us that we're going to work together on this.
Hmm.
I would draw upon my 30-year experience of managing construction and design teams. When you go to a construction site, as the project manager, as the person retained by the ultimate owner of that building, to manage the team that's going to build that building, you don't get to pick your partners. You don't get to pick the electrician and the plumber and the carpenter. And quite frankly, you are expected to lead that team. And I'm whether you like their politics or not, whether you think they cheer for the right hockey team or not, whether they're loud and abrasive or introverted and quiet, none of that matters. What does matter is, as a leader, you are driving people to a particular outcome. And
Hmm.
as members of the team, they ought know what the outcome is. They ought know what the project is, and they ought be coming there not to sabotage the team, but to work with the team to achieve the outcome.
Hmm.
I'm being really clear on the things that I'm running on as mayor. I'm being really clear about what I want to do during this term, in the first 40 days, in the first 100 days.
Hmm.
If I get elected as the mayor, people that come to that council table ought know what it is that is being endorsed by the voters of the city of Edmonton.
Hmm.
That's the project. That's the building. And we don't have to like each other, but we have to go and build that building as determined by the people we represent. It's that ethic that I'm going to bring, and I've been doing it for 30 years, so I know I can do it here.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and you mentioned project, and that gets me thinking about kind of projects in general, and even the construction or some of the big projects in the last few years, and
Yeah.
just overall spending levels at the city. What do you think about the way the city currently spends and how things could be changed, or completely redone in the next 4 years?
Well, I mean, it's out of sight, and the amount of gold plating that I see and extraneous costs that I see are overwhelming, and it's been really hard to push against that.
Hmm.
We had someone decree many years ago that that we would tolerate no more crap in our buildings. But what has happened is that the city has hired a city architect, that we will only on our big projects allow architects from other places to design those buildings. There's a design familiarity piece about our climate and our city that is lost. We see projects that are more art than they are purposeful. And we've got to just change that ethic. It's okay to have buildings that are primarily function related, that have got a modest amount of improvements, but not the overtop thing that we're seeing on these projects. The number of building projects individually that I've seen that have way too much cost in them is astronomical. I want to establish a proper infrastructure committee at the council level. So this would
Mhm.
be an infrastructure committee that would have both membership of the mayor and some councillors and representation from our private constructor sector, that together would both comb through and review uh, budgets and schedules for individual projects, but then also review the plan for combined projects. So
Mhm.
all of the road projects together, what does that look like? And if it means we're shutting down a whole part of the city, we're not going to do that. When you look at all of the projects that form our bike lane envelope, let's discreetly look at those projects and make sure that they are actually valued, that they're actually
Mhm.
wanted by the communities that they're going into. So it comes back to council taking the reins on this and really being thoughtful and engaged and reviewing in a very clear way projects and schedules on a project basis, and pardon me, budgets and schedules on a project basis, and budgets and schedules on a macro level to make sure we're not
Mhm.
overspending at a macro level and that we're not constraining our resources at a macro level.
Mhm. Yes, and I mean, like the city has had massive property tax increases in recent years, and to keep up with some of this spending, it follows that you need to have these increases. What do you think about that? What does the city need to do under you as mayor in order to get like a handle on these increases?
Well, I would say this, when you're sitting around your kitchen table or you're sitting around your corporate table, you look at what your revenue is, you look at what your obligations are, and you hope that there's money left at the end. So, I mean, you look at what your paychecks are gonna amount to this year. You look at what your mortgage is, what your grocery bills are, what your utility bills are, what your vehicle bills are, what it's gonna cost to put your kids in school. And if there's not money at the end of all that, even just a little bit, you have to go back into those things and find a way to make it work. You have to spend within your means. The
Hmm.
city doesn't do that. The city looks at all the things that it wants to do, whether we need them or not, figures out how much they cost, and then takes that money out of the pockets of the taxpayers.
Hmm.
We need to plan our budgets the way that you plan your budget at your kitchen table or at your corporate table. And
Hmm.
when we do that, when we prioritize the things that we need, when we allocate the dollars to do those things properly, and then you get to the bottom of the list and you're out of money, then you stop doing things. You
Hmm.
manage within your means. That is the ethic that needs to be brought to city council. So when I say that council needs to lead this, I mean it. And when I say we need to do a line by line review of what we're already spending money on, uh, I mean it. And then when we get to the lines where there's no money left, then we're not doing those things. And we need to have the courage and the determination to actually bring that ethic to our budgeting. And then when we have a budget that is within our means, that takes the pressure off of taxes, this constant 7, 8, 9% increase in taxes, and we get it down to something that's tolerable, something close to the rate of inflation or even under the rate of inflation.
Hmm. So you're not in favor of cutting property taxes then, but you're also not in favor of jacking them up. It's kind of a see how it pans out approach, or.
Well, I think we need to be pragmatic about this, right?
Hmm.
The city of Edmonton makes multi-year commitments, and so we it's going to take a couple of years to get this back under control.
Hmm.
To suggest that we can get to zero or under zero in the first year or two, well, we have contractual obligations that simply won't allow us to do that. But what
Hmm.
we do have is the ability to take our discretionary spending outside of those obligations down to a minimum.
Mm.
So we're not going to get to zero, at least not immediately, but we're not going to be at 7, 8, 9% either. It gets to something that makes sense to most people most of the time, particularly if they actually start seeing their money at work for them, that they actually
Mhm.
start seeing that services are actually being provided for the money they spend. What I'd like to look at is if we can level off taxes for a number of years, what does it look like in 4 or 5 years? And if your property taxes as a proportion of your revenue, either in your home or in your business,
Hmm.
if it's a lower percentage of the money you bring in, then we're on the right track. So the
Hmm.
gross taxes might not go down, but taxes as a measure of your capacity to pay will absolutely improve.
Hmm. And how do you see service quality kind of feeding into this? Because every year winter time comes around and snow removal is a hot topic. And,
Sure.
many neighborhoods don't feel that they are served quickly enough or, at all. And so the funding needs to be there for these services. But how do you kind of um, perceive that happening in the next 4 years if we're doing such a revamp of what budgeting looks like?
Well, that's where I talk about reallocation, and that's where I'm careful to say that we're going to, both reallocate dollars and reduce the number of dollars. But I will offer you this. In 2025, the gross property tax revenue to the city of Edmonton is $2.4 billion. In
Hmm.
2021, it was $1.8 billion. So our gross tax revenue has gone up $600 million in 4 years. And
Hmm.
that's $600 million a year. That's our operating budget. That's a lot of money.
Hmm.
But our snow clearing budget has gone from roughly $60 million a year, and it was static. It was $60 million a year for 15 years. In the last couple of years, it's modestly increased to something like 65 or $67 million. But the city is 50% larger.
Mm.
So when we talk about reallocating, we had a conversation about this about 3 years ago at City Council. The right level of money to properly clear snow in Edmonton is $100 million a year.
Hmm.
And so we need to get that budget up to $100 million. But I don't want to do it by raising taxes. We need
Hmm.
to take it from other places in our budget and allocate it properly to the services that people value the most, that they prioritize the most, and that they expect us to deliver.
Hmm.
So people then say, well, where would you take those dollars from? Well, from things that we don't need to do. What do governments do? Well, people can't do for themselves and what the private sector won't do for them. Uh, and so what are we involved in that the private sector ought to actually do? Land development is the top of the list for me. We don't need to be developing Blatchford on tax dollars. That makes no sense. If we let our land development industry in Edmonton, which is a
Hmm.
healthy, robust industry, they can deliver our goals in places like Blatchford for less money and actually deliver them faster. So
Hmm.
we could redirect tens of $millions out of the land development department to the snow clearing department. Taxes would not go up, but services would improve. That's
Hmm.
just one example of a trade-off. There are countless examples of trade-offs. And when we go and comb through the budget, we'll find a lot of them. So this is the process that we need to engage, not just for snow clearing, but for all of those primary services that people want to see improved.
Hmm. Yeah, and that City Hall is really the one that should be doing it. And
Yep.
so repurposing some of that funding goes back to something you said earlier as well when it comes to the police and the community policing,
Yep.
and whether that relates to transit or just safety within the community. And so, what do you think about the relationship between the Edmonton Police and Council and the Police Commission and how to improve that, while at the same time working on repurposing some of the funding there in order to have that impact on public safety?
Well, there's no question that at the end of the last term and the beginning of this term, that there were people on council that were determined to sabotage and perhaps even eliminate that relationship with the police service.
Hmm.
Now that has improved, I will say that has gotten better in the last year or so. We've had some new people arrive at the police commission, which have come with a I would suggest a more deliberate, dispassionate, mature approach to, quite frankly, not engaging with some of our counselors that want to get into the personal fights and
Hmm.
simply sticking to the work. We have a new police chief who seems to be in the early days demonstrating that same ethic. Stated another way, we have our police commission and our police service that are not allowing themselves to get triggered by some of the rhetoric that they're hearing from some of the counselors.
Hmm.
If we replace those counselors and eliminate that rhetoric entirely, we have the basis of a new relationship.
Hmm.
But as the mayor and quite frankly as the leader of the table, I will not tolerate people deliberately attempting to sabotage those relationships. There are tools at the council table that will not permit that kind of rhetoric to be uttered, and I intend to use them so that we actually get the relationship that we need. That doesn't mean we're not muzzling people that are making honest attempts to be thoughtful about our budgets, thoughtful about our police service, thoughtful about our social service ecosystem. That does not mean that there's not reasonable questions to be asked, and a level of accountability that needs to be applied by city council to all things. But it does mean that you stay away from the personal, that you stay away from the rhetoric, that you stay away from the generalizations, and that you stick to the specifics about this police service in this city. And that's what I'm going to insist on.
And do you think that council should have a greater oversight over the EPS budget?
Well, these are the constructs that are before us, right? On the one hand, it's city money that goes to the police service, and the police commission is in charge of providing that oversight. There's a better way for that is empowered to provide that oversight. And there's a reason why elected officials do not have a direct line of sight, and more specifically, a direct line of direction to police officers. If I, as the mayor, can tell the police service who to arrest and who to not, that's a bad outcome. So we need to strike this balance of accountability and oversight, but not overreach. We've seen examples of that in the not very distant past about elected officials that had attempted to overreach and direct the police service into who gets a ticket. That's a bad idea. But finding that sweet spot of accountability and empowerment is where we need to live. And that starts with coming to the work honestly and not with an agenda to sabotage the work. And we've had people that have come with that agenda, unfortunately.
And what role do you see the public playing in helping to keep these institutions accountable?
Yeah, very good point. And the police commission had started down this road. I'm not sure, frankly, where they are right today, in the first week of October. But the police commission was, and I expect will continue to do more outreach, to first of all educate and inform our public about what the role is of council, of the commission, of the service. And I do believe that it is an objective of the police commission to engage the public more, to do more of that public interaction, to get out of the closed room downtown and get out into the community and clearly understand what people's concerns are and address those concerns. I'm not trying to put it off on the commission, but because they hold the service to account, they need to be part of that engagement effort. And I see a council role for that too, but I see that being led by the commission because they are at the fulcrum of this intersection between the city council, the city administration, the commission, and the service.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. It's a tough spot.
I will say that one of the things I do want to do is as the mayor is create a table for people to be able to connect right into the governance of the city and to be empowered and to have a voice. And I'm speaking mostly of faith and cultural communities of people that have come from other places and that have at the very least an apprehension of being persecuted and prosecuted and not treated equally in our public spaces by our police service. Concerns do get raised about that there's, particularly amongst racialized communities, that they're not met with equality and equity and dispassionate regard by our police service. So there is a need to have a table at the mayor's office, at the mayor's level, to engage with those communities to ensure that they feel like they're being treated equitably. And that ranges from how our police service treats them and meets them, and getting into things like employment and procurement at the city of Edmonton to ensure that we have equity and equality for everybody. So things like name blind, face blind hiring processes, so that you literally don't know what a person's ethnicity or what their journey to Edmonton encounters. You simply know what their qualifications are, their experiences, and hiring practices are on that basis. So not favoring anybody in our community,
Mhm.
but providing equity and equality to opportunity across our community. There's some things we need to do, and I think that needs to be led by the mayor's office.
Well, and this election is really interesting for the city of Edmonton because it's the first time that we're seeing political parties at the municipal level.
Yeah,
And so that, that appears in different ways for many people.
yeah.
Are you affiliated with any of these parties? And if so, what does that mean for you and your campaign?
Yeah, we built a party, the Better Edmonton Party, and this is a formal municipal level party.
Hmm.
And because it's a formal party, there are legal constraints. It is illegal. It is against the law for anybody in the Better Edmonton Party to associate with anybody in a provincial political party.
Mm.
Literally against the law. So that means there is no back channel support of me, of my Better Edmonton candidate colleagues, of the party from either of the primary provincial parties.
Hmm.
That's literally against the law. It's against the law for me to take any associations or favors or lists or advice or dollars. And it is against the law for people in those provincial political parties to be involved with a
Hmm.
municipal political party. So, that is a very important distinction. There
Hmm.
are other candidates that have loose associations, notably the Working Families Association of most of the incumbent councillor candidates. Um, they are not under the same legal constraint
Hmm.
about who they can associate with, who they can take favors from. It is still uh, not a great idea to be taking favors from provincial political parties or from unions or from people that are not transparent about what they're doing.
Hmm.
But it's not the same legal standard that the Better Edmonton Party, that I and my candidate colleagues must hold ourselves to.
Hmm.
And I think that's important to understand. Um, when people think about parties and political parties, they do not want to see that division. They do not want to see that separation. At the city council table, there is no power imperative that allows that. You're literally at city council. We are not allowed by law to have a caucus or a cabinet. There is no way for a mayor to kick a person off of council and not allow them to vote. The premier can do that. They can kick somebody out of caucus and they lose their ability to influence the agenda. That cannot happen at city council. So
Hmm.
we have a team of people that are ready to govern in a more responsible way, that share the platform elements that I have outlined here, that are ready to get to city hall and get to work. And they cannot be and literally are not aligned with any political party at the provincial level. And I would just offer one more comment that um, be, we acknowledge that people do not want to see that deeply divisive, somewhat immature personal attack kind of thing happen at City Hall. I would
Hmm.
invite people to go and examine the social media content of some of the people that are running that are not part of the Better Edmonton Party and see what that behavior looks like.
Hmm. And so, you can't accept favors, from provincial
Hmm.
politicians or anybody at the provincial level. But, values based, do you align with either of the major political parties in Alberta? Mainly because it helps people understand values of candidates, essentially.
Yeah, and so I think that people can perceive my values. I mean, if I'm going to be put on a spectrum, I'm a little bit right of center because I want to see every dollar maximized to its maximum effect. I'm going to
Hmm.
go back to something I said earlier. What do governments do? Governments do for people what they cannot do for themselves and what the private sector is not going to do for them.
Hmm.
The private sector is not going to build us a transit system because a transit system would cost in the private sector construct $13 a ride. So
Hmm.
government has to do that. It becomes a government service for people that do not have another means of moving around the city. That's
Hmm.
what governments do. So, you know, the government of Edmonton City Council is a giant social service agency through that lens. I want to see us use the dollars that we collect to the very maximum effect. So in that way, I'm a fiscal, I guess, a fiscal conservative.
Hmm.
But there's no way to uh, not be a moderate person at the city level when you think about what it is that cities do. But
Hmm.
roads and potholes and LRT systems don't know whether they're conservative or progressive. They
Yeah.
simply know that they need to be either funded or not funded. And that is our ethic, right? So
Hmm.
yes, when people are looking at values, they want to kind of understand what your value system is. My value system is I want to treat your dollars the way I've always treated the dollars of the clients that I've represented on the projects that I've built. It's not my money, it's yours. My job is to spend your money to maximum effect in the best way possible, delivering the things that you actually want me to deliver. That
Hmm.
is my ethic. And that is where I stand on this spectrum. And frankly, that is where the team members in the Better Edmonton Party also
Hmm.
stand. This is
Hmm.
not about politics. It's about good management, sound fiscal management, and a move away from ideology and a move towards pragmatism in how we spend those dollars.
Hmm. And I mean, Edmonton is such a growing and diverse city, and that kind of has challenges in and of itself in
Sure.
that you are not going to always be able to make everybody happy. And how would you speak to those people who think that the mayor isn't going to work for them in certain areas, or represent them fairly when there's multiple competing interests, at ward levels?
Um, my job is to lead a team of counselors to do, the best thing for the city of Edmonton. And so when you're
Mhm.
talking about, is it something in this ward or something in that ward? Well, what's the next best thing for the city of Edmonton? So there's a prioritization piece there.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I'm, I'm being pretty straightforward, I think, with my belief system and with what I think the city needs to go to and the direction it needs to go. We are very fiscally constrained right now. We are
Mhm.
we are very, very challenged on our finances, and there are giant storm clouds on the horizon. We're going to lose two bridges in the next 10 years. We need a solution for that tomorrow. You don't
Mhm.
build a bridge in a day. We have half our transit fleet needs to either be refurbished or replaced in the next 5 to 7 years. That
Mhm.
is a great big cost. So we have giant fiscal constraints, which means
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to do everything for everyone. So that means we're going to have to maximize our efforts to do the most things for the most people most of the time.
Mhm.
And that's going to mean that some things that we want to do are going to have to wait for a few years. And that's simply a fact. The other thing we have not done as a city is maximize our opportunity for partnerships with the private sector, partnerships with other levels of government, and different ways in which we approach our work.
Mhm.
A school yard with a couple of schools in it can be more than just a couple of schools. It can be a
Mhm.
community hub. It could have a senior center. It could have a fire hall. It could have a community center. It could have a bit of retail. And so when you look at all of the things that a piece of land might have or that a building might have,
Mhm.
you can check off a number of boxes. If you just think about it differently in the way that you create your partnerships, both financially and in an operating kind of a way, and
Mhm.
maximize your opportunities, you can stretch your dollars farther. And because I've done it for 30 years in the private sector as a professional engineer, there's all kinds of ways and all kinds of solutions. I can tell you as an engineer, there's never just one answer.
Mhm.
There's a range of answers and a range of strategies and a range of solutions, and each one of them has a different time and cost constraint. So it's not necessarily picking, a binary choice of this, not that. It is
Mhm.
a it is a suite of solutions that give us as many of the things that we need as possible for the least amount of financial input while making sure that we meet all of our goals and objectives. I've been doing it for 30 years. I have no doubt that I can do it here.
And so, how do you prioritize, or how would you prioritize, like between where the need is greatest versus where would benefit the most? Like, how do you see that trade-off?
Well, I think it starts with, what services serve the most people. Uh,
Mhm.
our transit center serves 90 million people a year, right? Our bike lanes serve about 90,000 people a year. Where should
Mhm.
the next dollar go? Where it's going to have the most effect.
Mhm.
There's crossover pieces to that. What our bus system can't work without a road network, so we better invest in our road network.
Hmm.
And that might mean adding some capacity in places because the city's 1/3 bigger than it was 10 years ago.
Hmm.
So, these are just simple pragmatic choices that any corporation is going to be faced with.
Yeah.
There's certainly things we're going to want to do, but they might only serve a few people, and we're going to have to think about that. The flip side of that, though, is that this needs to be an enjoyable place to live and work and play.
Hmm.
If all you do is go to school and go home, or all you do is go to work and go home, well, you're not going to do that for very long. There's got to be more to
Hmm.
life than that. So we need to pay attention to that too. We need a nighttime economy. We need a thriving arts community. It needs to be fun. There needs to be the opportunity that entertainment can come here, or entertainment can thrive here. So, it's not all infrastructure. It's not all, counting pennies. Um, and when you make investments in those other things that enrich and enliven our community, and you enable others to enrich and enliven our community, then more people want to be here. And it becomes, there's that piece to the puzzle too. So
Hmm.
it's a lot to balance and a lot to figure out. And not
Hmm.
all of it can be measured in dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Tim, this has been a really interesting conversation, and I've really appreciated hearing your perspectives on all of the challenges facing Edmonton currently. If you were to leave one thing with our viewers, what would you want people to think or, have in mind going forward to the polls?
Yeah, well, I would, I guess take the data, the feedback that we've heard from the early polls. And that is that, 60 to 70% think that this city is on the wrong track. And I
Mhm.
expect that a lot of the people that are going to watch this interview, or are watching right now, feel that way. So
Mhm.
what are your choices going forward? Well, this race at the point that we're talking here on October 8th has distilled down to basically two front runners. One of those front runners is a status quo candidate, has described the current council as the best council ever, has said that they're not interested in trying to rebuild the relationship with the province, and quite frankly wants to continue going down the same path. And I'm telling you that for 8 years I've been trying to get us on a different path. That I've built a team, and that my intent is to change course, to get us back on track.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, I think the choices are down to that. It's going to be a close election. Um, and I think you really need to think about supporting one of these two candidates and making your choice very clear. And while the other candidates are all fine people, they're not going to win this election. So, put your vote with where it's going to count. And on October 20th, vote for Better Edmonton, because we're going to bring the change that you really want to see.
Well, thank you, Tim, so much for your time today. And to our viewers, thank you also for your time and your interest. And as Tim said, get out there and vote. This is an important election. We need votes. 2021 was a dismal turnout from
Yeah.
the voter perspective. So let's have that, increased this year and really get out there. Stay engaged and stay informed. So thank you again, Tim. It has been so lovely to chat with you today.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you.